What's going on, guys? I put together this video on intuitive eating for some of our clients inside of my coaching company, Default Kings, and just broke down essentially what role it actually plays and how it contributes to weight loss and then weight maintenance long term. So it was super informative. My original plan was to just drop it for DK clients, but they got a lot of value out of it. So I figured I would actually just make it available publicly as well. So if you haven't met me before, this is your first time seeing me and you just happen to click on this video, my name is Joey Yochheim. I'm the co-owner of defaultkings.com, and we have helped over 600 men lose anywhere from 10 to 50 pounds and build the consistency to keep it off long term. So this is what I have learned. This is my understanding philosophically of intuitive eating and how we implement it at our company. So I hope you find this video helpful. If you do all the YouTube stuff like comment, subscribe, share, send it to a friend, and I hope you find it valuable. Boom. What's going on, guys? I wanted to go ahead and just put together a little video for you guys specifically, just DK clients, because I've been getting a question quite a bit recently, both on Twitter and also from you guys directly about the idea of intuitive eating, right? And what kind of purpose does that serve? Right? Do I eat intuitively? Do I track all my calories? How do Gabe and I and Chris and Nick, how does the coaching staff here actually operate when it comes to diet? So I just wanted to answer that question. In general, I'll try to keep this as quick and brief as possible. And essentially my stance, and I would say our stance as a whole as a coaching staff on intuitive eating, is the idea that generally speaking, most people don't get to a point where they're overweight or where they're over fat if they have been diligent about tracking their calorie intake, if they have been diligent about tracking their protein intake, and if they have actually had data historically. It's very rare that we have somebody come into DK that, has a minimum of 20 pounds to lose that says, hey, for the last 5-10 years, I've tracked every single calorie. I've tracked all of my protein. I've never missed a meal tracking. And the reason that that's rare and really has never, ever happened is because it's so statistically improbable for you to have that much data about your nutrition and then still struggle with your weight. Because eventually you would conclude after having tracked for that long that we're probably overeating, and you would just naturally, logically decide to slowly scale back that calorie intake. And if you're weighing yourself, eventually you're going to watch the number on the scale start to go down in the direction you want. Right. So when it comes to intuitive eating, generally, people get overweight because they ate intuitively. You don't get overweight because you ate in a calculated manner. It doesn't typically happen that way, right? So if your plan to beat obesity or lose fat is to continue to eat intuitively, even though that's what got you to the point where you now have weight and you now have fat to lose, right? It's a pretty bad plan, right? Just being blunt, right? The definition of insanity is doing the same thing, expecting a different result. And so if intuitive eating and not tracking your calories and not having data about your nutrition is what got you to this point, it'd be silly to think that continuing to do that is going to get you out of it, right? It's unreasonable. It's illogical, right? So when it comes to intuitive eating and where it actually comes into play from a health perspective, because I'll tell you straight away, I don't track every single calorie now, right? Where it comes into play is once you get to your goal body weight, which we define going forward here. We're coming out with some more modules for you guys. We're going to break basically the entire weight loss and health journey into 3 phases. And phase 1 is getting to a sub 25 BMI. So like a healthy body weight. Right? Phase 2 will be getting to a sub 15% body fat. Right. So we focus on the body weight first, the BMI first, then we focus on the body fat percentage in phase 2. And then phase 3 is like health optimization, where you're looking at getting your resting heart rate down, getting your VO2 max as high and as capable as you can be, getting your triglycerides HDL ratio in order. All of these factors that lead to just longer lifespan and overall better health, right? Once we break it into those 3 phases, where intuitive eating comes into play is once you've already gotten to a BMI of 25, you've already conquered phase 1, and it can come into play somewhere around phase 2 or phase 3, somewhere in that area. Okay, so bare minimum, if you want to consider intuitive eating, our opinion is that you need to bare minimum be at a 25 BMI or lower. Right? Generally 22 to 25 is fine. If you want to figure out what your BMI is, you can just go online and type in BMI calculator. It's just your height and your weight, and it comes out with a formula. 22 to 25 is what we recommend for generally healthy. 25 to 30 is considered overweight. 30 to 35 is considered obese, and 35 plus is considered morbidly obese. And that is the range in which your all-cause mortality percentage goes up drastically. Right, is above, actually really around 30 is when it gets to 44%. Above 35, it could be as high as 88%. Right. So Again, where intuitive eating comes into play is somewhere in that like phase 2, phase 3. You've already gotten to a 25 BMI. You're very close, if not already at a sub 15% body fat, and you're looking to just make the health changes a little bit more sustainable and a little bit more practical long term. Because we don't expect any of you guys to track calories forever. Although that would be optimal scientifically, it's not very practical for the long haul for most people, especially guys that are business owners, entrepreneurs, professionals, people that have families, etc. It's a bit tedious. And again, like I said, I don't track calories every single day. Gabe doesn't track calories every single day, and I'm sure Nick and Chris don't either. Right now, do we know how to do it? Absolutely. Right. Do we have a general understanding of what our daily calorie intake is? Absolutely. But that's come with years of coaching it and also applying it ourselves. So you can think of calorie tracking as a skill set that you develop. And eventually you get to a point with calorie tracking where you're so familiar with your food choices that you then can eat intuitively. But intuitively eating after years of tracking and having a ton of experience tracking is a lot different than being somebody who's never learned or been taught how to properly track calories and then dives into intuitive eating and has no idea what they're doing. They're just eating their feelings. That's how people get overweight. So intuitive eating, again, this is something that you can use as a tool to make your dieting a little bit more sustainable, but I wouldn't even consider it as a factor until your bare minimum sub 25 BMI. And the phase 2 part of this, getting to sub 15% body fat, that's like an optional threshold. I would prefer that as a coach. I would prefer you to stay dialed until you get to sub 15% body fat, but that's me being a coach. That's me being biased. Practically, it's not necessarily a necessity, right? Now, when it comes to strategically eating intuitively, basically breaking down what I do, what Gabe does, what our coaching staff, basically everybody does here. And again, you have to remember, we're all in like phase 3, right? I'm sub 25 BMI, or I'm actually right now I'm like 25 and a half, right? So I'm at 25 BMI. I'm sub 15% body fat. I'm at like 12 or 13 right now. And then really, once those two phases are checked, we're in the midst of phase 3. It's like health optimization. I'm concerned more now about my VO2 max, my resting heart rate, longer term health metrics, as opposed to BMI and body fat. So you have to remember, we are in phase 3. And this is the strategy that we're using with intuitive eating. We look at the eating as essentially our main priority is protein intake, right? We still loosely track our protein intake, right? I know bare minimum getting at least 170 grams of protein per day, which is my current body weight, 170 pounds. Bare minimum, I hit that. From a caloric perspective, I don't explicitly track my calories. I technically don't explicitly track my protein, but I know if I have, a pound to a pound and a half of meat a day, plus other trace proteins, I'm well over 170. So I know where I'm at protein wise. Calorically, I don't explicitly track it, right? But what I do track every day is my weight. And I've set a parameter for myself that is 170 to 175. If I weigh in and I'm ever over 175, I know I'm overeating calorically and I pull it back. Right? I decrease my calorie intake. I keep the protein intake the same, but I cut away carbs or fats or the sides that I'm having with my meals, or I tighten up the leanness of the meats that I'm eating as my protein source. Right? So 175 is my ceiling. If I ever cross that, it's kind of my red alert, right? I'm going to peel back the calories, right? And 170 is like my minimum right now, right? If I ever weigh in and I'm 168, I eat a little bit more, right? I eat a little bit more to get myself in that floating range. So once you're at, again, the sub 25 BMI, roughly 15% body fat, or in my case, below it, and you're in phase 3 where we're looking at just long-term health and longevity, it's more of a maintenance game, and that's where you can use intuitive eating. But the big caveat here, again, like I said, is you have to weigh yourself every single day. Or if I wasn't weighing myself and I was just eating whatever I wanted and 2 months went by, I could step on that scale and be 185 pounds, no problem. Right? It's very easy to do. It's very easy to just have sneaky calories. So I'm still very diligent about weighing myself every day and making sure I'm staying in my set range that I'm comfortable at, right? Staying right in that 170 to 175. If I go over it, I peel back the calories. I keep the protein the same. If I go under it, I increase the calories and I try to stay right in between there because that's a good weight for me to sit at, right? When I do, jiu-jitsu competitions, or if I'm prepping for an MMA fight or something like that, you bet your butt I bust out the scale and I bust out the calorie calculator again, because now I'm actually cutting weight for an event, for a sporting competition. I have to be dialed, right? I have to be dialed. So that's the only time right now in my personal life, and I know Gabe is in a similar situation, where we bust out the calculator and we track every single calorie, is if we're cutting for an event. But that's sport specific. It's not health specific. Health specific, As long as I'm staying between 170 and 175, I know my intuitive eating plan is going well, right? So that's essentially the overview of intuitive eating, and in terms of where it's at, right? If I were to summarize this quickly, in general, the idea to make this as concise as possible for you at the end here, in general, people don't become overweight if they are diligently tracking their calorie intake and their food intake. Most people became overweight because of intuitive eating. So if your plan to become not overweight is continue intuitively eating, which is likely what got you to the point where you're overweight, that's a bad plan. Now, I don't expect you, and we don't expect you as a coaching staff to track calories forever because we don't even do it. But we expect you to do it until you at least get to a 25 BMI and maybe until you get to 15% body fat. And once you're surpassed sub 25 BMI or at 25 BMI, so technically sub 26, right? Once you're at 25 BMI or below, once you're at 15% body fat or below, and you want to transition to a more practical, longer term approach with the eating, like we all do, your main priority at that point should then just become protein and hitting 1 gram per pound of your body weight, right? All of you guys are assigned 1 gram per pound of your goal body weight, or it's between 0.7 and 1 gram per pound of your goal body weight. But in this scenario, we are already at goal body weight. So once you're in that phase 3, like we are, this is why I'm eating 1 gram per pound of my current body weight. That's my main priority. And the only way I adjust my calories is if I come outside of my weight range that I've prescribed for myself, which is 170 to 175. If I'm over, I pull back my calorie volume. I keep the protein the same though, always. I just pull back my calorie volume. If I weigh in below 170, I increase my calorie volume, right? And I make sure I'm consuming more to stay within that range that I've set for myself as a parameter. So the big caveat here is once you do get to the point where you're intuitively eating, you have to continue weighing yourself daily, right? And you have to stay on top of the protein still, right? But the calories, you can use that and adjust that based on what you're seeing on the scale, right? So that's a concise little summary of everything. If you guys have any questions about this specifically, obviously let us know. Ton of nuance here, right? Every case is individual. This is just in general recommendation, but there's a reason that you guys have one-on-one coaches. There's a reason we have group calls. There's a reason there's one-to-one attention here because there's nuance, right? There's a ton of nuance. So if you have those specifics, come to us, ask us questions. Hope you have an amazing rest of your day. Talk soon.